Representative Jared Moskowitz didn't shout. He didn't wave papers or slam his desk. He simply leaned forward, stared straight at the witness, and asked a single question. "Are you meeting with the president?" The air in the room seemed to freeze. The witness blinked, smiled nervously, and mumbled something about not being able to discuss his afternoon schedule. The moment turned awkward fast. Laughter rippled through the room, but Moskowitz wasn't joking. His calm tone carried something sharper, doubt. Because he wasn't just asking about lunch plans. He was asking why someone testifying at a hearing about free speech seemed desperate to keep a secret. What started as a routine hearing quickly spiraled into something else entirely. Behind the smiles and small talk, it became clear that the real story wasn't being told.
Let me just do my thing.
Okay.
Well,
I'm just going to correct. Kash Patel's coming in 2 weeks. I'll give you an extra 10 seconds. Kash Patel, the director of FBI, is coming in 2 weeks, and the Attorney General's coming in 4 weeks.
fantastic. But still, we're not doing that this week. The week we're having votes on the Epstein thing. So, Pam Bondi gives the influencers, these Republican influencers, a binder. It says Part 1 of the Epstein files. No one of you saw it. It was quite spectacular. The Attorney General then says the Epstein list is on her desk. Then DOJ issues a memo, says there is no list. Then, you have any questions about any of that? We've had no hearings on any of that at all. That, the list is on my desk, then there is no list. Then we gave binders to Republican influencers. This committee's had no questions on any of how that transpired at the Department of Justice. Then hold on.
Well, it sounds like you're going to in the next few weeks. So that's a jolly good thing.
Mr. Farage, we can talk soon, but not yet. Okay.
Right.
So then the president comes out and says the whole thing's a hoax. He blasts his own base. He blames Barack Obama. I mean, he hasn't been president for a very long time. Republicans then in committee vote against the release in the Rules Committee. Then Republicans refuse to go back in the Rules Committee because they're getting blasted for their vote, getting crushed by their own base. Congress leaves a day early. Then the administration sends the Deputy Attorney General to meet with Maxwell in jail. He happens to be Trump's former personal attorney. She says something favorable about the president. Miraculously, she gets transferred to a minimum security prison. The president starts talking about how he has the right to pardon her if he wanted to. The leaks to the Wall Street Journal then stop. We come back from break. We have the Massey petition. Comer does a document dump where 97% of these documents are already public. How long has he had those documents? Why hasn't he released them for the last 6 weeks? Does it the day of the vote. Then Republicans drop a non-binding resolution trying to kill the Massey discharge petition. The White House said passing the Massey discharge petition is a hostile act. Wow. That's a lot of distraction and deflection and misinformation. Wait, passing a discharge petition to release the Epstein files, the White House said would be a hostile act. Nope, we have no questions about that. But why? Why is it that we're spending so much political capital to keep this list from coming out? You think the list should come out? You think we should know the people who dealt with Mr. Epstein, Mr. Farage?
I thought I was coming to a hearing on free speech, not process.
Oh, but listen, but here's the
And
good...
It sounds like you're discussing process.
No. Do you think the list should come out?
I have no opinion on it. I don't know at all.
So we have victims that were sexually abused by potentially people in power, and we don't know who's on the list.
I'm very happy.
Hold on, Mr. Farage. We don't know who's on the list. We don't know who's on the list. We don't know if the president is or is not. I'm not going to say he is or isn't. I'm just going to say these are weird behaviors. We don't know that there aren't other people in Congress that are on the list. Right? We have no idea. Do you think the list should come out? You think people in power should be held to account for these victims who have been sexually abused and assaulted? You think the list should come out?
I think that I'm very happy to come to a different hearing where you talk about legal process.
Okay.
But today,
Will the gentleman yield for a quick question?
Were
you aware that he has already called for the Epstein file to be released? It has been reported that he has called for it to be released.
Oh yeah, right here, just to refresh your memory.
Yeah, but
I happen to have this.
But that's not
How random.
But that is not. Look, you can ask me if you like about
Do you agree
social
with
security
yourself?
policy.
Do you agree with yourself?
We are here to discuss free speech.
Hold on. It's awkward for your lunch after this? Do you agree with yourself?
No, it isn't at all.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'm just curious. This committee has jurisdiction over the
Gentleman's
Department of
time.
Justice.
Yeah.
Why have we allowed Comer to cover this up for the last couple of months?
As I said,
why is this committee not
I
taking
said 6
jurisdiction?
weeks ago that we will have the FBI director in, we will have the attorney general in, and we are doing that in 2 weeks. You can you can go through that whole list. That whole list, you can do whatever you want to do with, I got lots of questions for the FBI director, including the whistleblower who came forward and told him that Adam Schiff leaked classified information. I want to ask him about that as well as the issues you all want to ask him about. That's why he's coming, so we can ask all these questions and follow the process, as Mr. Farage just talked about.
Mr.
The
Chairman,
gentleman from Virginia.
unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent?
I'd like to enter the political article into the record that Mr. Farage said the Epstein file should be released.
Without objection. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
I thank the chairman. I want to talk about censorship tools that are being used by Europe and protectionist measures that have major consequences for U.S. companies and free expression.
And when the name Jeffrey Epstein entered the conversation, the silence in that room grew heavier. For months, the Department of Justice had promised transparency about the Epstein files. Yet every time the public came close to answers, the facts changed. First there was a list, then there wasn't. First there were binders, then denials. The contradictions piled up until no one knew what to believe anymore. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General at the center of this storm, claimed that the infamous Epstein list was sitting on her desk. The statement made headlines instantly. Then, almost as quickly, the DOJ walked it back, insisting no such list existed. But that same week, several Republican influencers began posting photos online holding sleek binders labeled Part 1, the Epstein files. The binders looked official, polished, and oddly timed. How could they exist if the list didn't? Who printed them? Who gave them out? And why were social media personalities seeing them before members of Congress? Moskowitz couldn't ignore it. The pieces didn't fit. He looked at the sequence of events, the missing list, the binders, the hearings delayed, the shifting narratives, and saw a pattern. Not of incompetence, but of control. Someone was managing information, deciding who saw what and when. And the more questions he asked, the harder people worked to change the subject. This wasn't just about one list of names. It was about whether America's justice system was playing by its own rules. The deeper Moskowitz pressed, the stranger the story became. The Department of Justice said one thing on Monday and the complete opposite on Friday. The list existed. Then it didn't. Then it was under review. Then it was classified. All the while, key figures inside Congress were mysteriously missing from hearings that should have been priority number one. Votes on file releases were scheduled, then canceled. Hearings were rescheduled, then postponed indefinitely. On paper, it looked chaotic. But to Moskowitz, it looked rehearsed. Every time we get close to the truth, he said, someone changes the story. And then came the line that stopped everyone in their tracks. The White House had privately described the effort to release the Epstein files as a hostile act. Hostile because the public wanted transparency. Imagine that. Asking to see evidence of one of the worst criminal networks in modern history suddenly considered aggression. It wasn't just unsettling, it was insulting. And it told Moskowitz everything he needed to know. This wasn't confusion or bad timing. It was strategy. Then, just when the controversy seemed to be fading, a strange new twist emerged. A quiet prison visit no one could explain that a deputy attorney general, someone with direct ties to leadership, visited Ghislaine Maxwell in prison. No press notice. No formal statement. Within days, Maxwell was transferred from her facility to a minimum security prison. Officially, it was routine. Unofficially, it raised every red flag imaginable. Who authorized it? Why now? And why was the meeting never logged publicly? Rumors spread instantly. Some claimed it was a check-in. Others whispered that it was something more, a conversation about silence, cooperation, or favors. Nothing was proven, but the timing spoke for itself, because right after that meeting, the leaks stopped. For months, internal memos, documents, and redacted names had been trickling into the press. Then, nothing. Overnight, it all went quiet. The headlines about Epstein vanished. The outrage faded. And once again, the story disappeared behind closed doors. Moskowitz wasn't ready to let that happen. When Congress returned from recess, Chairman James Comer announced a massive document release. The phrase sounded powerful, historic, even. The media braced for revelations. Cameras rolled. Statements flew. But when the files finally dropped, almost all of them, 97%, were already public. It wasn't transparency. It was theater. For 6 weeks, the committee had held on to those documents. 6 weeks of silence, of deflection, of blaming bureaucratic delays. And now, on the exact day of a crucial vote, they staged a release that revealed nothing new. Moskowitz wasn't fooled. If this is what they call accountability, he said, no wonder the public doesn't trust us. He had a point. The timing was too clean to be coincidence. Why hold back old files only to dump them at the last second? Why claim progress when the public already had this information for years? And why did every new disclosure seem to serve political optics rather than truth? Behind all the politics were real people. The survivors. They had waited for years, reliving their trauma while the system that failed them promised justice that never arrived. They had been told to stay patient, to trust the process, to let the truth come out in due time. But every denial, every delay, every carefully worded excuse felt like another betrayal. These weren't faceless names on court documents. These were people who had risked everything to come forward. And while officials debated legal limitations and ongoing investigations, those survivors were forced to watch powerful institutions play chess with their pain. Moskowitz brought the focus back to them. If these were your daughters, your sisters, your friends, he said, would you still call this politics? No one answered. The truth is, no one wanted to. Because answering that question meant admitting that somewhere along the way, justice had stopped being about people. It had become about preservation. Moskowitz wasn't the only one calling it out, but he was one of the few doing it in plain language. He didn't talk like a politician. He talked like someone who had run out of patience. He said what most people were already thinking, that the system was more concerned with protecting its image than delivering the truth. Transparency, he argued, isn't complicated. It's not about grand gestures or press conferences. It's about honesty. His solution was simple. Hold a private, secure congressional briefing. Let lawmakers review every file under protection, away from cameras, but in full. Maintain a chain of custody logs showing who accessed what and when. And bring in an independent investigator with no political affiliation to review how the documents were handled. That's not reckless. It's responsible. That's how you protect victims and still hold the powerful accountable. But those suggestions never made headlines. Because the truth wasn't exciting enough for politics and too dangerous for those with something to lose. The DOJ cited privacy laws. The courts cited confidentiality. Everyone cited something. But no one could explain why the story kept changing. Why names that were once promised for release were suddenly reclassified. Why dates kept shifting. Why the public always seemed to be one step behind the truth. Every day of delay made it harder to believe that transparency was the goal. Every vague statement made it look more like damage control. And the survivors, who had already been through more than most people could imagine, watched as justice slipped further away. Moskowitz's confrontation went viral for a reason. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't partisan. It was real. He called out a culture that hides behind legal language and procedure while avoiding accountability. He said out loud what the public had been screaming online for months. That power protects itself first, and truth comes second. When he said, "We can't pretend to care about justice if we're afraid of the truth," the room went silent. Because everyone knew he was right. That sentence cut deeper than any political soundbite. It was a challenge to lawmakers, to the press, to the people watching at home. Do we actually want transparency, or just the illusion of it? Because if we keep letting scandals fade behind paperwork and closed doors, then nothing changes. Here's what makes this story different. It isn't just about the Epstein case. It's about how power behaves when it's cornered. When the spotlight gets too close, it doesn't fight back. It goes quiet. It shifts the narrative. It hides behind procedure. And while that silence might protect a few people in office, it destroys public trust. The truth doesn't need to be dramatized. It needs to be documented. It needs to be released, carefully but completely. Because every time institutions hide behind secrecy, the public starts to believe they're hiding something worse. Moskowitz's message was simple. If you believe in accountability, you can't be selective about it. Justice isn't meant to serve convenience. It's meant to serve people. And that's what this is really about, people. The ones who were hurt, silenced, and promised answers that never came. The ones who are still waiting. He made it clear that the only reason anything changes in Washington is because of pressure from the public, from journalists, from people who refuse to look away. When the noise gets too loud, when the outrage doesn't fade, the truth finally starts to surface. That's why this story can't die here. Because if the Epstein files vanish quietly into history, it won't just be another failure of justice. It'll be proof that silence wins. Moskowitz's stand wasn't about one case or one committee hearing. It was about something bigger, a demand that truth stop depending on political timing, that justice stop bending to convenience, and that survivors stop being told to wait for another round of reviews. The next steps are clear. Pressure Congress for a secure briefing. Demand a public accounting of who had access to those binders. Ask why Ghislaine Maxwell's transfer happened so quietly. And push for an independent investigation, free from political interests, to review the full chain of events. Because in the end, sunlight is the only disinfectant that works. And here's where you come in. If you've watched this far, don't let this story fade into another cycle of distraction. Share this video to keep the pressure alive. Comment with what accountability means to you and what you think transparency should look like. And if you want to follow every update, every contradiction, every attempt to bury the truth, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because this isn't over, not by a long shot. The Epstein files, the vanishing list, the conflicting statements, none of it adds up. And every unanswered question brings us one step closer to the answer they're afraid to admit. The only way truth disappears is if we stop looking for it. So keep watching, keep questioning, and don't let the silence win. Because the most powerful thing in Washington right now isn't secrecy, it's attention. And as long as people like you keep paying attention, the truth will have nowhere left to hide.